In the rugged canyons of West Texas, where Comanche warriors still roamed free and every sound could mean life or death, a young cavalry scout heard something that would change his understanding of humanity forever. What began as following a distressed horse colt through dangerous territory became a discovery that proved music could transcend every barrier humans create between themselves. The year was 1875, and tensions between settlers and Comanche bands ran high throughout the region. But hidden in a secret canyon, protected by ancient spirits and the loyalty of wild horses, lived someone whose gift would challenge everything Nathan Cross believed about enemies, friendship, and the power of pure sound to heal wounded souls. This is the incredible true story of how a crying colt led a white scout to a blind Comanche girl whose flute music could tame wild animals and soften the hardest hearts, proving that some connections exist beyond language, culture, and the hatred that divides civilizations. Ready for a story that will restore your faith in human goodness? Hit that like button if you believe music has the power to heal any wound. Subscribe and ring that notification bell, because tales like this prove that understanding transcends all boundaries when hearts are open to wonder. Drop a comment about how music has touched your life. I read every single one. The year was 1875, and Nathan Cross had been scouting for the U.S. cavalry in West Texas for 3 years when he first heard the sound that would haunt his dreams and change his life forever. The young colt's crying echoed across the Badlands near Devil's Canyon, a mournful wail that seemed to carry more desperation than any animal should possess. Nathan had grown up on a horse ranch in Missouri before the war took his father and brothers, leaving him with skills that made him valuable to the Army's efforts to patrol the vast territories where Comanche bands still roamed freely. His ability to read animal behavior and track movement across difficult terrain had saved his unit from ambush more than once. The crying came from somewhere deep in the maze of canyons and mesas that stretched toward the Llano Estacado, territory that most white men avoided due to its reputation as a Comanche stronghold. Nathan's orders were to scout water sources for an upcoming patrol, but the distressed animal sounds pulled at his conscience despite the obvious dangers of investigating alone. Nathan's horse, a steady mare named Belle, showed unusual reluctance to approach the source of the crying, her ears flattening and nostrils flaring as if she sensed something beyond normal animal distress. The veteran scout had learned to trust his mount's instincts during years of dangerous patrol work, but something about the colt's desperate calls overrode caution and practical considerations. The sound led Nathan deeper into canyon country than he'd ever ventured alone, following narrow trails that seemed to disappear and reappear according to some pattern he couldn't understand. The crying continued ahead of him, always just out of sight, but never too far to follow, drawing him through landscape that grew increasingly beautiful and mysterious with each mile. Rock formations in this part of the canyon showed colors Nathan had never seen before, deep reds and purples that seemed to glow in the afternoon sunlight, creating an almost cathedral-like atmosphere that made him feel like an intruder in some sacred space. The silence between the colt's cries was so complete it seemed to press against his eardrums. After 2 hours of careful tracking, Nathan finally glimpsed the source of the crying, a young Mustang colt, probably 6 months old, standing at the edge of a narrow canyon that dropped away into shadows too deep for his eyes to penetrate. The animal was clearly distressed, but showed no signs of injury or immediate danger. The colt's behavior struck Nathan as highly unusual for a wild horse, as it made no attempt to flee when he approached, but instead seemed to be trying to communicate something urgent. Its eyes held an intelligence that reminded Nathan of his childhood dogs, as if it understood far more about the situation than any horse should reasonably comprehend. When Nathan dismounted and approached slowly with outstretched hands, The Colt allowed him to examine its condition thoroughly, revealing no wounds or physical problems that might explain its distressed crying. The young horse was well fed and healthy, suggesting it hadn't been separated from its herd for long. Yet something was clearly driving its desperate attempts to attract attention. The mystery deepened when Nathan noticed that the colt's crying seemed to follow a specific pattern, almost like a rhythm or melody that repeated with slight variations. His musical training from childhood Sunday school helped him recognize what sounded like intentional phrasing rather than random animal distress, though such sophisticated communication seemed impossible for a horse. Nathan's attention was drawn to the canyon edge where the colt had been standing, and careful examination revealed a narrow trail leading down into the depths that his eyes hadn't initially detected. The path was barely wide enough for a horse, but showed signs of regular use, worn smooth by countless trips up and down the canyon walls over many years. The colt moved to the trailhead and looked back at Nathan with what seemed like expectation, as if waiting for him to follow. Every instinct warned the experienced scout about the dangers of descending into unknown territory, where Comanche warriors might be waiting in ambush. But something about the animal's behavior suggested urgency that transcended normal caution. Bell refused to attempt the narrow trail, no matter how much encouragement Nathan provided, forcing him to make the difficult decision of whether to continue alone on foot or abandon whatever crisis had driven the colt to seek help from a human. The young horse's continued crying made retreat feel like abandoning someone in desperate need. Nathan secured Bell at the canyon rim and began the treacherous descent on foot, following the colt down a trail that seemed designed for mountain goats rather than horses. The path switched back and forth across the canyon wall, requiring careful attention to foot placement while maintaining balance on loose rock that could send him plummeting to his death. The deeper Nathan descended, the more the canyon's atmosphere changed, from harsh desert landscape to something resembling a hidden garden. Springs provided moisture that supported vegetation he'd never seen in West Texas, and the air carried scents of flowers and fresh water that seemed impossible in this arid region. Halfway down the trail, Nathan heard something that stopped him in his tracks, the clear, sweet sound of a wooden flute playing a melody so beautiful it seemed to make the canyon walls themselves resonate with harmony. The music was unlike anything he'd ever heard, combining technical skill with emotional depth that spoke directly to his soul, despite its completely unfamiliar style. The colt's crying had stopped the moment the flute music began, and Nathan realized that the animal had been calling not for help with its own distress, but to bring assistance to whoever was making that extraordinary music in the hidden depths of Devil's Canyon. The mystery was deepening with every step he took toward the bottom. As Nathan continued his descent toward the source of the haunting flute melody, he began to understand that he was approaching something far more significant than a simple rescue situation. The colt had led him to a discovery that would challenge everything he thought he knew about the relationship between humans, animals, and the mysterious forces that sometimes guide destiny. The canyon floor revealed itself as a hidden paradise that defied everything Nathan knew about West Texas geography, with clear springs feeding pools surrounded by grass so green it seemed to glow in the filtered sunlight. Ancient cottonwood trees provided shade for a landscape that belonged more in fairy tales than the harsh reality of frontier territory. The flute music grew stronger as Nathan approached its source, each note carrying emotional weight that seemed to communicate directly with his heart, despite the cultural and linguistic barriers that should have made understanding impossible. The melody spoke of loneliness, hope, and a connection to the natural world that transcended human language entirely. Nathan discovered the musician sitting beside the largest spring, cross-legged on a woven blanket, with her back to him, as she played an instrument carved from what appeared to be cedar wood. She wore traditional Comanche dress decorated with intricate beadwork, and her long black hair was braided with small shells and feathers that caught the light with each movement. The girl appeared to be perhaps 16 years old, though her complete absorption in the music gave her an ageless quality that suggested wisdom beyond her years. She played with the skill of someone who had devoted countless hours to perfecting her art, her fingers moving across the flute's holes with the precision of a master craftsperson. What struck Nathan most powerfully was the realization that the girl was blind. Her unseeing eyes closed in concentration as she created music that seemed to make the entire canyon come alive with harmony. Birds had gathered in the nearby trees to listen, and small animals sat motionless around the spring, all drawn by the magical quality of her performance. The young colt that had led Nathan into the canyon approached the girl and nuzzled her shoulder gently, causing her to pause in her playing and reach out to stroke the animal's neck with obvious affection. The bond between them was clearly deep and long established, explaining the horse's desperate efforts to bring help when something threatened their peaceful existence. Nathan remained motionless at the edge of the clearing, reluctant to disturb the scene, but gradually becoming aware that the girl knew of his presence despite her blindness. Her enhanced hearing had undoubtedly detected his approach long before he'd realized she was aware of him, and her continued playing suggested acceptance rather than fear of his intrusion. When the melody finally ended, the girl spoke in accented English that surprised Nathan with its clarity and precision. "The horse told me you would come," she said without turning around. "I've been waiting for someone who could hear the music calling across the desert and would be brave enough to follow it into sacred places." Nathan found his voice after a moment of amazement at her ability to communicate in his language. "I heard crying and followed it here. I didn't know anyone lived in this canyon, and I certainly didn't expect to find someone who could make such beautiful music in the middle of nowhere like this." The girl turned to face him then, revealing features of striking beauty marked by the clouded eyes that confirmed her blindness. "My name is Ayana," she said with dignity that belied her youth. "I am the last daughter of the Wind River Band, and this canyon has been my home since the soldiers came and scattered my people to the four directions." Ayana's story unfolded gradually as Nathan remained respectfully at the edge of the clearing, learning that she had been born blind but blessed with musical gifts that her grandmother had recognized as sacred. The old woman had taught her the traditional songs and helped her create the flute that had become her voice for communicating with the spirits and animals. "When the cavalry attacked our winter camp 2 years ago," Ayana continued, her voice carrying sadness but no bitterness, "my grandmother brought me here to this place where our people have always come for healing and vision quests. She said the canyon would protect me until the time came for my music to serve its true purpose." The hidden canyon's miraculous abundance became clearer as Ayana explained its sacred significance to her people, describing springs that never ran dry and plants that grew despite the harsh climate because the spirits blessed this place with their protection. She had survived here through knowledge passed down by generations of medicine women. Nathan learned that Ayana's blindness had actually enhanced her other senses to an extraordinary degree, allowing her to navigate the canyon with confidence and communicate with animals in ways that seemed supernatural to someone raised in white culture. Her flute music served as both artistic expression and practical tool for maintaining harmony with the natural world. The young horses that lived in the canyon had become Ayana's companions and protectors, responding to her music and serving as her eyes when she needed to travel beyond the immediate area of her camp. The colt that had led Nathan here was the youngest of her herd, recently weaned but already displaying the unusual intelligence that characterized all the animals under her care. "The horses understand my music better than most humans ever could," Ayana explained, playing a few soft notes that immediately brought several mustangs emerging from the canyon's hidden recesses. "They know when I am sad, when I am happy, when I need their help, and when danger threatens our peaceful home." Nathan watched in amazement as the horses responded to different melodies with specific behaviors, some coming forward for attention while others moved to protective positions around the clearing. Ayana's music served as a sophisticated communication system that allowed her to live safely among wild animals that would normally avoid or attack human intruders. The afternoon passed quickly as Nathan listened to Ayana's music and learned about her solitary but rich existence in the hidden canyon, understanding gradually that he had stumbled upon something far more significant than a simple rescue situation. This blind Comanche girl possessed gifts that challenged everything he thought he knew about music, animal communication, and the spiritual world. As evening approached, and Nathan realized he would need to return to his military duties, Ayana's music took on a melancholy tone that seemed to express her loneliness and longing for human companionship. The canyon's peace and beauty couldn't entirely compensate for the isolation that came with being the sole survivor of her scattered band. The discovery of Ayana's hidden existence created a dilemma for Nathan that challenged both his military duties and his growing sense of moral responsibility towards someone who had been living in isolation for 2 years. His orders required him to report any Native American presence in the territory, but turning in a blind girl seemed like a betrayal of the trust she had shown by revealing her sanctuary. Nathan's return to Fort Davis brought questions from his commanding officer about his extended absence during what should have been a routine scouting mission, forcing him to provide carefully edited reports that omitted any mention of the hidden canyon or its remarkable inhabitant. The deception troubled his conscience, but seemed necessary to protect Ayana from military policies that showed little distinction between hostile warriors and harmless civilians. The memory of Ayana's flute music haunted Nathan's dreams and waking hours, creating a restlessness that his fellow soldiers noticed but couldn't understand. Her melodies had awakened something in his soul that conventional military life couldn't satisfy, leaving him torn between duty to his uniform and growing desire to return to the peace he'd found in her hidden world. Captain Morrison, Nathan's commanding officer, assigned him to increased patrol duties in the canyon country, unknowingly providing opportunities for the young scout to return to Ayana's sanctuary while maintaining the appearance of following orders. These visits became the highlights of Nathan's existence, offering respite from the harsh realities of frontier military service. Each return to the hidden canyon deepened Nathan's appreciation for Ayana's extraordinary gifts and the unique life she had created in isolation from both white and Comanche societies. Her music continued to evolve and grow more complex, as if their friendship was inspiring new levels of artistic expression that reflected her expanding emotional world. Ayana's English improved dramatically through their conversations, while Nathan began learning basic Comanche words and phrases that allowed him to understand some of the traditional songs she performed. Their cultural exchange created a bridge between two worlds that were supposedly locked in eternal conflict, proving that individual connections could transcend social and political divisions. The practical challenges of Ayana's isolated existence became more apparent as Nathan observed her daily routines and survival strategies, recognizing both her remarkable adaptability and the limitations imposed by her blindness and solitude. She had mastered the skills necessary for immediate survival, but lacked access to resources and social connections that would ensure her long-term security. Nathan began bringing supplies during his visits: salt, metal tools, fabric, and other items that Ayana couldn't produce or find in the canyon, carefully selecting things that would improve her quality of life without creating dependency or arousing suspicion among his military colleagues. Their relationship evolved from chance encounter to genuine partnership based on mutual care and respect. The seasonal changes brought new challenges and opportunities for their unlikely friendship, as winter weather made Nathan's visits more difficult, while providing Ayanna with increased privacy due to reduced military patrols in the remote canyon country. Their time together became more precious and intensive, deepening their bond despite the cultural and practical obstacles they faced. Ayanna's music began incorporating influences from Nathan's descriptions of white culture, creating fusion melodies that combined traditional Comanche techniques with rhythms and harmonies he hummed from memory. Their artistic collaboration represented a peaceful blending of cultures that seemed impossible in the broader context of frontier conflict and misunderstanding. The spring of 1876 brought increased military activity as tensions escalated between the army and various Native American groups throughout the region, making Nathan's secret visits more dangerous and raising the specter of discovery that could endanger both Ayanna's safety and his own military career. The outside world was intruding on their peaceful sanctuary. Nathan's growing expertise in canyon navigation and his detailed knowledge of water sources made him increasingly valuable for military operations, leading to promotions and responsibilities that provided better cover for his visits to Ayanna, while simultaneously making those visits more crucial for his own psychological well-being and moral development. The contrast between Nathan's military duties, which often involved tracking and potentially fighting Native Americans, and his friendship with Ayanna created internal conflicts that forced him to examine his own beliefs about race, culture, and the justice of government policies toward indigenous peoples. Her humanity and dignity challenged every stereotype he'd been taught about hostile Indians. Ayanna's own understanding of the broader world expanded through Nathan's accounts of military activities and territorial politics, helping her comprehend the forces that had destroyed her people while reinforcing her determination to preserve what remained of her cultural heritage through music and spiritual practice. Their conversations became a form of cultural documentation that preserved knowledge that might otherwise be lost. The evolution of their relationship from protector and protected to genuine equals reflected both Nathan's growing respect for Ayanna's wisdom and capabilities, and her increasing confidence in navigating a world that extended beyond her canyon sanctuary. They were teaching each other skills and perspectives that enriched both their lives, despite the dangerous circumstances surrounding their friendship. As their second year of friendship progressed, both Nathan and Ayanna began to recognize that their relationship had become something deeper than cultural exchange or mutual assistance. The music that had first brought them together was evolving into a language of the heart that transcended the barriers society had erected between their peoples. The realization that they were falling in love created new complexities and dangers, as romantic relationships between white soldiers and Native American women violated both military regulations and social taboos that could result in severe punishment for Nathan and potentially deadly consequences for Ayanna, yet their connection had grown too strong to deny or abandon. Nathan's visits to the hidden canyon became more frequent and longer as he struggled with the decision of whether to reveal their relationship and face the consequences, or continue living a double life that honored their love while protecting them from a world that would never accept their union. The music they created together reflected both the joy of their love and the sorrow of its impossible circumstances. The crisis that would test Nathan and Ayanna's love came in the late summer of 1876, when increased Comanche raids near Fort Davis led to expanded patrol operations that brought military units dangerously close to the hidden canyon. Nathan's inside knowledge of the search patterns allowed him to warn Ayanna, but the pressure was mounting to find and neutralize any Native American presence in the region. Colonel Henderson, the new commanding officer at Fort Davis, had a reputation for ruthless efficiency in dealing with what he called the Indian problem, and his arrival brought new policies that made Nathan's double life increasingly precarious. The colonel demanded detailed reports on every canyon, water source, and potential hiding place in the territory, information that Nathan possessed but couldn't share without endangering Ayanna. Nathan's reputation as the fort's most skilled scout made him invaluable to Colonel Henderson's aggressive patrol strategy, but it also placed him in the impossible position of leading searches that might discover the woman he loved. Each mission brought the terrible possibility that he would be forced to choose between his military duty and Ayanna's safety. The solution came from an unexpected source when Ayanna announced that her grandmother's spirit had visited her in dreams, providing guidance about how to use her musical gifts to serve a larger purpose than personal survival. The old woman's vision showed Ayanna a path that would allow her to preserve her culture while finding her place in the changing world. The spirits say that music can heal the hatred between our peoples, Ayanna told Nathan during one of his increasingly rare visits to the canyon. They showed me a gathering where warriors and soldiers listen to the same songs and remember that we are all human beings with the same hopes and fears, the same capacity for love and sorrow. Nathan initially dismissed Ayanna's spiritual vision as dangerous wishful thinking, but her conviction and the practical wisdom she had always demonstrated made him reconsider the possibility that music might indeed bridge divisions that seemed insurmountable. Her flute had already proven its power to calm wild animals and soothe troubled hearts, so why not angry warriors and suspicious soldiers? The opportunity to test Ayanna's vision came when Nathan learned that a delegation of Comanche leaders was planning to meet with military officials to negotiate a peace treaty, a gathering that would bring together representatives of both cultures in circumstances that might allow for unprecedented cultural exchange. Ayanna's music could provide the emotional foundation for understanding that political negotiations alone could never achieve. Convincing Colonel Henderson to allow a blind Comanche girl to perform at a military gathering required all of Nathan's accumulated credibility and careful presentation of the potential benefits for the peace process. The colonel's pragmatic desire for successful negotiations eventually overcame his cultural prejudices, though he made clear that Nathan would be held personally responsible for any problems. Ayanna's preparation for her first public performance since her childhood involved not just musical practice, but also psychological preparation for exposure to the world beyond her protected canyon sanctuary. Nathan helped her rehearse English phrases and coached her on military protocol, while she taught him traditional Comanche songs that might help bridge cultural understanding during the crucial meeting. The peace gathering took place at a neutral location between Fort Davis and the Comanche settlement, with representatives from both cultures maintaining careful distance while negotiating terms for coexistence in territory that both groups claimed as ancestral homeland. Tensions ran high, despite everyone's stated commitment to finding peaceful solutions to their conflicts. Ayanna's entrance transformed the atmosphere of the gathering as her dignity and obvious vulnerability disarmed the suspicions and hostilities that had dominated the preliminary negotiations. Her blindness made her seem unthreatening to the soldiers, while her traditional dress and obvious Comanche heritage reassured the tribal delegates that she represented authentic Native American culture rather than military manipulation. The moment Ayanna began playing her flute, the entire gathering fell silent as her music created an emotional space where cultural barriers seemed to dissolve and common humanity emerged. Her melodies spoke of loss and hope, of love for the land and respect for all living things, themes that resonated with both Comanche and military hearts, despite their different expressions. Nathan watched in amazement as hardened cavalry officers wiped tears from their eyes while listening to Ayanna's performance, their usual stoicism overcome by music that communicated directly with emotions they had learned to suppress. The Comanche delegates responded with visible pride in their cultural heritage and growing hope that understanding might indeed be possible between their peoples. The peace negotiations that followed Ayana's performance proceeded with a spirit of cooperation and mutual respect that surprised everyone involved, as her music had created an emotional foundation for the political discussions that followed. Both sides seemed more willing to compromise and seek solutions that honored the legitimate needs and concerns of their former enemies. Ayana's success at the peace gathering led to requests for additional performances at other diplomatic meetings throughout the territory, making her a valuable asset for the military's efforts to establish peaceful relationships with various Native American groups. Her musical diplomacy proved more effective than threats or bribes in creating the trust necessary for lasting agreements. Nathan's role as Ayana's protector and cultural interpreter gave him new importance within the military hierarchy, while allowing him to openly pursue their relationship without violating regulations or social taboos. Their partnership was now seen as serving broader military and territorial interests, rather than representing dangerous personal attachment across cultural lines. The hidden canyon remained Ayana's home and sanctuary, but she now traveled throughout the territory with Nathan as her escort, bringing her gift of musical healing to communities struggling with cultural conflict and misunderstanding. Their love story had evolved into a mission that served both their peoples while allowing them to build a life together. Colonel Henderson, initially skeptical of Nathan's unconventional approach to Native American relations, became one of Ayana's strongest supporters, as her musical diplomacy consistently produced better results than traditional military methods. The success of her peaceful approach influenced military policy throughout the region, saving lives on both sides of the cultural divide. The marriage of Nathan Cross and Ayana took place in the hidden canyon where they had first met, officiated by both a military chaplain and a Comanche medicine man, in a ceremony that celebrated the union of two individuals and the hope for understanding between their peoples. The music that had brought them together continued to guide their shared future. Their children grew up bilingual and bicultural, learning to navigate both worlds with the wisdom their parents had gained through love and mutual respect. Ayana's musical legacy continued through her descendants, who carried her gift for healing hearts and bridging differences into future generations that would build on the peace their parents had helped create. The story of the cavalry scout who followed a crying colt into a canyon and found love, music, and a new understanding of what it meant to be human became legend throughout the territory. Nathan and Ayana's partnership proved that individual connections could transcend the barriers that divided peoples, and that sometimes the most powerful diplomacy was simply showing others the contents of an open heart.